This is the Letters in Black and White series of the Dissidents Podcast. The following is the third in a series of podcast conversations with interesting people on the topic of race in America. Today's guest is Nancy Williamson, a resident of Virginia. Nancy and Wink are distant cousins who learned of each other on 23andMe. Even those of good intentions can fall prey to caricatures and stereotypes based on race. Welcome to a meeting of cousins across the color line and the dangers of misperceiving others. So, Wink, here we are again.
Yes, we are.
Our another recording of us talking to your distant family members. Today we have Nancy with us, and there's a fun story behind Nancy. And Nancy, we're going to let you tell your own story here too. But here's where we are. Wink and I, and people who've been following us know this, but Wink and I met when we were writing about race. But all of our life has been anything but race. You know, we're just trying to connect as humans. And one of Wink's activities, if you will, is to find how he's connected across color lines. And that's been through ancestry. And Nancy is a cousin.
Fifth cousin.
Fifth cousin. Okay.
Yes.
So with that said, why don't you give a little more on you and Nancy?
Oh, okay. Well, to start, let's go back in time a little bit. I had an interesting childhood, Nancy. You might appreciate this. As a native Virginian, history runs deep in our family. I grew up on a street called Twyman Road in Chesterfield County, Virginia. And everyone on Twyman Road was a Twyman. I mean, until I was the age of 6 or 7, I assumed the entire world was Twymans. The entire world was related to me. And little did I discover that there were other people in the world besides Twymans as I got older. So that was kind of neat. But I always had this sense of wanting to know more, because I could only go back in my Twyman line to the last known slave, which was Scott Twyman. And he was born in 1848, I think in Madison or Orange County, Virginia. So there was always that brick wall, if you will. And then lo and behold, Ancestry came into town, and 23andMe and Family Tree and whatever. And I began to do some research, because I was always curious in knowing where the Twyman name came from. And so one day, on my birthday, actually, in 2016, I got an email from a cousin, a distant cousin, who's also an Ancestry wonk or nerd. And he said, Wink, you need to contact this woman. She has Twyman in her tree, and she's DNA related to you. And there are not many Twymans in this country, Nancy. There are only 4,000 of us in a country of over 350 million. So what are the odds that this random person, and she lived in Louisville, Kentucky, would be related to me? So I reached out to her, and on my birthday, she confirmed that we were indeed fourth cousins, and that opened up my entire family tree. So I went from 1848 to 1661, when George Twyman I left Kent, England, and settled in Middlesex County, Virginia. And so that was great to me. It was a great blessing, a sense of completion. And so I continued searching to try to expand my my family tree. And one day on 23andMe, I came across this fifth cousin. And I was trying to connect the Walker family to my family, as I recall, to nail down my connection to the Twymans. And I emailed her, and it was September 6th, 2017, 5 years ago. And I said, Dear Ms. Williamson, we are predicted fifth cousins, according to 23andMe. I grew up in Chesterfield County, Virginia, but I now live in San Diego. What a difference. I'm always a very excitable person, so that exclamation mark after difference. Question. Are you a descendant of Edward Walker, 1770 to 1776? Walker was born in Wales, England, and died in Culpeper County, Virginia. Walker is one of my ancestors, so maybe he is our ancestral connection. Warm regards, Wink. And that was just a typical message for me, reaching out to cousins. And days went by, Weeks went by. Months went by. Nancy, I have to confess, I had forgotten all about it. I had just completely forgotten about my email. Oh, okay. So the year 2018 comes and goes, and I had forgotten about my email. The year 2019 rolls in, and then on a momentous day, February 7th, 2019, I was just strolling through 23andMe, and lo and behold, what do I see? My cousin Nancy had responded to me. That's poetic, by the way, it runs. And she said, well, you know what? It appears you messaged me a long time ago, but I haven't been on the site in a while, so I apologize for the delay. None of the surnames you mentioned are familiar to me, but I don't know much about my family past. My grandparents, I was born in Roanoke, Virginia. My mom was born in Norfolk, Virginia. She was Dorothy Marie Pogue, is it? Born to Sam Pogue and Pugh, thank you, Pugh, and Doris Aurelia Peckner. I never knew my grandparents. Evidently, my grandmother had my mom at age 16 and was an alcoholic and didn't take care of her kids, and so my mom grew up in foster homes, unfortunately. And then there were the final three sentences that kind of hooked me, right, as someone who's interested in my common ancestry. She said, so today I learned my fifth great-grandfather was a slave owner who sexed up his property, quote unquote. That is so damn depressing. Excuse my language. Much luck to you in your search to learn about your ancestry. And I love Nancy's spirit here. It comes through. Sorry for that ass of a fifth great granddaddy owning a human being. Glad his son got the farm. So what came through to me was, this cousin has some spunk. She's got some spirit. I like that. But I was also intrigued to know, well, there must be more to this story. I'm intrigued. And so what began after that was a series of messages for me trying to ferret more out of this story. Because you'd mentioned in another email after that the next day, do you know anything about Daniel Brown's ancestors or other children and wife? Well, Daniel Brown is like the founding father of my Black side of the family. There are 100 cousins that claim Daniel Brown as kind of their founding father. He acquired, I think, over 300 acres of land in Chesterfield County after the Civil War, and we hold him in great regard. Some of his descendants still live on that property today. So when you said that, I thought, okay, well, I want to know if that's the most recent common ancestor, and what does she know, and to let her know that, none of us are responsible for the mistakes in the past. We're not our ancestors. I'm not George Twyman III, who owned 48 slaves in Albemarle County, and you're not your ancestor who's a shady, shall we say. And so I wanted to connect and make that clear. And so I wrote an email, and an email, and nothing. Silence throughout the land. And so now I want to talk to Jen, because about this time, Jen and I started writing about connections and across the color line. And you were on my mind, Nancy, because I have always been a very, as you can tell, very gregarious, happy, joyful person. I was a dynamo student politician in grade school because I was so pleasant. I was so outgoing, likable, whatever. Wink, the name Wink is my brand, right? So I was just wondering what happened with my cousin Nancy. She was so provocative and intriguing, and then nothing. And so that old song, Just My Imagination, by Babyface and Gwyneth Paltrow, that kicked into play. So take it from there, Jennifer. What happened as we were getting to write our book and thinking about distant cousins of different races? How did Nancy come into the picture?
Yeah, and so Nancy, you don't know this. This is all probably new to you.
Right. She's oblivious in Virginia.
You're in the background of this writing, but what? Well, it's funny because Wink assumed, and I think this is what we're going to get to with you. Wink assumed that because you knew of your slave owner past, that you were embarrassed to actually speak to Wink, and that you didn't want to it's not you acknowledge, you did acknowledge it, but like that was what cut the conversation short. Like I acknowledged that my family were slave owners, and therefore that's why we've got this ancestry across the color line, and there was this shame and embarrassment. And so Wink interpreted your silence as someone who was reticent to talk about these difficult issues. And so a lot of our own discussion was, how do we have these conversations across our color line? I mean, my family, by the way, were slave owners. But here's the interesting thing, Nancy. So were Wink's family.
Yeah.
Even his black family, not just white family, were slave owners. And so that's kind of where the book got started. And how do we have these conversations that are tough, but we're here in 2022 and we're trying to make a difference. And so this is where you come in, where it's like, oh, this is an example, which we found out today, and you'll tell us more, that we were wrong in our assumption. But our assumption was that you were just like, I don't even want to have this. Yeah. I don't want to have this conversation. Like, I'm ashamed, like blackness is like the way my family treated Black Americans. And then finally, and Wink, before we go back to Nancy, I'm going to go back to you, because you just recently heard back from Nancy and you're like, oh my God, this, like my whole assumption for these past 2 years was completely wrong.
I was telling Jen and someone else, my dentist actually, I just came up when I was talking with my dentist a few weeks ago. I said, I felt 3 inches tall and overwhelmed when I heard from Nancy. At the same time, 3 inches tall and overwhelmed, because I thought, here I'm someone who, as you know, rails against caricatures, rails against stereotypes, believes in treating people as they are individuals, and I fell guilty, right, to all those old echoes and caricatures and stereotypes. And so it was it was an emotional feeling for me, because I saw that even as someone who has the best of intentions is still colored and influenced at some level by the old preconceptions of viewing people just as avatars for a group. So, for example, when we were writing, I said, and Nancy knows, Nancy's given me approval just to write what I said, just to talk about what I said. I said, in one part, I said, because we're talking about how can we move beyond this binary thing that you were a descendant of a slave owner, you were a descendant of a slave, and therefore you have to kind of live out those past relations in today's world. And so I said at some point, I have a white fifth cousin who did not reply to an email response from me on 23andMe after, in capital letters, 2 years. After 2 years, said cousin wrote me a furtive response where she said, 1, our ancestors sexed up slaves on his farm, and 2, she hoped he burned in hell. And I think I said, okay, great, okay. But what do I make of that? Like, how do I move along with that? How do I grow from that knowledge? I mean, what do I do with that? It's kind of like Nancy gave me half of the picture, but not the other half of the picture, which is moving on from the past. So I felt frustrated, as you remember, Jen, at that point. I was kind of like, I've got this part, but not that part of the coming together and reconciliation. And I think you looked at the silence and you made those assumptions. Well, maybe she fears you're trying to blame her. You're trying to shame her. She probably thinks you have some agenda. She probably thinks you want to put her into a box. She probably thinks you want to say that she's this kind of a bad person. And we were all just working. We were all just mixing together a stew of caricatures and stereotypes and wrong assumptions and wrong premises. And we thought we were the cool kids in school, right? Because we were like, seeing how things really were in the racial silence. And we could not have been more wrong. And so I think the spirit moved me to reach out to Nancy. I sent her a very long text message because I knew that if we're going to make the world a better place, these are kind of the mishaps we have to address openly and with joy in our hearts and love in our souls, understand and move ahead. And so that's kind of where I was coming from, Jen. I felt 3 inches tall, but I also felt the potential to make something good out of what we had done. And just tickled. Poor cousin Nancy had no idea that we were agonizing over this.
So now, Nancy, I mean, I'd love to hear
right
from So you didn't respond to Wink. I mean, you have a life. We all have a life.
Yes,
I mean,
yes, that's right.
And maybe you just didn't see the message, or you're not on 23andMe. Like, what's your side of the story?
Yeah, what's the Nancy side of the story?
Yeah.
Well, Wink. Seriously, I've been on that site for I don't remember exactly what year it was, but I'm going to say at least 10 years. I was an early adopter of 23andMe.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a whole other interesting story I can tell you another time, because I was looking for some other siblings. But,
right.
I get on that website like about every 2 years, and I don't have it linked up to my email. So if someone sends me a message on there, I don't get it. And so I get on there about every 2 years just to see if I'm related. Like, do I have some weird brother I didn't know? Or, like, am I related to a serial killer? Just kidding. But I know. I only get on there about every 2 years. And I really, Wink was so great. I really loved your message that you sent me explaining what your preconceptions were or whatever. It was very heartfelt. I completely understand how you would feel that way. I really do. Because you probably just felt ghosted. And the truth of the matter was, I just only get on there for 2 years. And I get on there and there's always a million messages. But I was pleased when I did and read yours. And it had nothing. Yeah. I was definitely not ignoring you, and you know that now.
I know that. Yeah, right. It's just amazing to me how there can be a reality, in this case, silence, and two different people.
I think that's a great lesson, because no matter how much we know, no matter how much, I hate to use this word, but how woke we think we are, we can always still learn until the day we leave this planet.
That's true. That is so true. Nicely said. All right. So this is the question, Nancy, I have for you after, I think it's now 5 years. So do you know who was the great granddaddy, the shady character?
Hey, no clue. Seriously.
Okay.
I messaged you back on that original message.
Yeah.
I was just asking you about info you had sent me and other people had sent me on 23andMe. I know nothing past my grandparent.
Gotcha. That's right.
I only knew them in name. So I know nothing. I've always had a very curious spirit as well, and really would love to know my ancestry, but I don't even know where to start. But
okay.
I loved your initial message to me. That right was a wake up call for me, because I was naive enough to think, because my family, what I know in my little tiny worldview right here is that I grew up really poor.
Yes.
And my family never had much of anything, and I was certain there's no way that anyone in my family ever had slaves. How could they own them? We've all been broke. I mean, how could we own them?
Broke.
That was so very naive of me. And I'm really glad that you touched base. I love, learning that. It breaks my heart that it is history. And again, very naive of me to think that. Anyway, I learned some stuff too. So.
Sure. So
yeah.
I think, Jen?
Well, I was just going to say it's interesting, Wink. So in our conversations that we've had so far with Mary yesterday, who wasn't your cousin, but you went to school with, and Nancy today, a lot of the people, and you can maybe expound on this, a lot of the people that we have been in conversation with, from Virginia, have been, their background has not been, and I'm talking only in financial terms, rich. Their background's been rich in history, right? But rich.
Yes.
And you tell this story, Nancy, you don't know this yet, but as part of our book, Wink tells this story about how the Twymans, there's black Twymans and white Twymans. And what's interesting about the Twyman line is the black Twymans are the ones who succeeded.
Well, that's
it's the
true.
white Twymans who didn't succeed.
He did message me that, so I did know that.
Yeah,
cool.
I did know that, and that's why my last sentence in that first message when I did reply back to him was, I'm glad the boy got the farm.
Mm-hmm.
Hey,
yes,
sure.
But it's such an interesting,
so just to give you a quick
conversation on America today, though, is that there is this sense that if you're black, you're poor, and life is only about oppression. You can never succeed. Sure. And Wink's life story is the exact opposite. And of course, Wink is just one person. He is just one person. His story is his own.
Right.
But his story is one of black, excellence, even while his white family were struggling.
Well, let me give you a story.
Wink, you want?
Yeah, sure. So here's the story, Nancy. Because I wish I knew. I bet I can find out easily because my son did 23andMe. So if he DNA connects to you, then it's going to be through my family. Let me get it straight. If he connects, and if he doesn't, then you're connected to me through. Then I'm getting confused. My son took the test, so if you're connected to him, genetically related, then you'll be connected to the Twyman line. Woo, that was a mouthful.
Right.
But here's the story.
But you got it.
I got confused. But here's the story of the Twymans. So in 1661, there was a teenager named George Twyman the First. In 1677, he moved he didn't move, he got on a ship called Recovery and sailed from Kent, England to Middlesex County, Virginia, where he became an indentured servant, Nancy. He was actually an indentured servant to a Thomas Lee. And so he was, I don't want to use the word oppressed, but let's say life was not good for the indentured servant Twyman. And as a matter of fact, he ran away. He ran away in the woods for a month to get away from Thomas Lee. So the only example of a runaway I know in my family is of a white indentured servant, George Twyman the First, which is kind of interesting. But so he had a son, George Twyman the Second, and he had a son, George Twyman the Third, who did a lot of stuff. Had a large farm in Albemarle County. He had 48 slaves. He was a writing buddy of Thomas Jefferson. He was the first head of the church in Earlysville, Virginia, called the Buck Mountain Episcopal Church today. So anyway, so he had descendants, and they lived in a house. So the entire farm was called Oak Lawn. It was on 1,000 acres. And that farm stayed in the family, the white side of the family, from 1750 to 1867. What people tend to forget is that when the Civil War ended, there was a lot of economic destruction. There was a lot of devastation throughout Virginia and other southern localities. And so the white Twymans lost the family home at an auction sale for taxes that were paid in 1867. But a family friend purchased the home so that the descendants could continue to live in the house in Oak Lawn. But over the years after 1870, like the 1880s, 1890s, 1900s, 10s, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, times were tough for those people. They didn't have running water. There was no electricity. I don't think they had cars. It was a tough way to go in that house. They were probably cold and shivering at night at times. So by 1965, they give up the ghost, and the house leaves the white Twyman family forever. Now, the black Twymans. Daniel Brown, my grandmother's grandfather. He was a slave. He was born in 1833. He was a slave. He acquired over 500 acres of land in Chesterfield County, Virginia, and Charlotte County, Virginia, after the Civil War. He had 17 children, I believe. And of those children, 10 remained black. 4 looked sufficiently Caucasian that they passed for white over time. But his children inherited a portion of his property, his holdings, and his grandchildren inherited a part of that property. And the property remained in the family probably to this day. There's still some descendants who live on that property. So in the 1960s, you have white Twymans who are just destitute. No car, no running water, no electricity, cold in the night. And then you have the black Twymans who are living in red brick homes. They have cars. They have indoor running water. They're doing very well in terms of business. In fact, my uncle, Willie Ernest Twyman Sr., was probably the largest black businessman in Chesterfield County in the 1860s. So if you were to look at the white Twymans and the black Twymans and take a snapshot in the 1960s, white Twymans are doing okay in their red brick homes. You got the white Twymans living in a 2-century-old wood frame home that has no running water or inside electricity. So that's an example that we don't really hear about that much, I think, in the public discourse. I think it's easy to assume you create caricatures. One race is rich, one race is poor, and then that's how we should think about things. That's not always the case. You have to look at the individual person. Right. So another example, and one of the ideas I had about this podcast was, it's so interesting to me. I have 2 cousins named Nancy. I have my one cousin named Nancy, who I just met today, Nancy Williamson. And I have another cousin named Nancy. Now, my other cousin named Nancy, she is a black woman who lives in a northern city. And she's been blessed to have a very comfortable existence. She lives in a fairly nice home. Her kids go to boarding school, private school. She's very prominent in Jack and Jill. She is, I think, the granddaughter of a judge, an appellate judge, the great granddaughter of people who were very middle class in South Carolina in the 1800s. In fact, for 4 generations, there were prosperous black ancestors in her line in South Carolina. So it's interesting to me that to the outside world, they would think, well, if you've got 2 cousin Nancys, that white cousin Nancy probably is living off of trust funds. She goes to Europe every summer. She shops at Tiffany's. She's laughing. She has a Bentley. She has a second home in Sag Harbor or Martha's Vineyard. And they might think my black cousin Nancy is, struggling and in despair and living from paycheck to paycheck and all the rest. And it's so wrong. It is so wrong because we make assumptions about people just based upon race and skin color. That's not the reality. You could have a wonderful play or movie about the 2 Nancys that would rock the world of people, right? Because they would see how life really is, right? Right? Yeah.
Right.
And what's funny is, to the outside world, they would think I'm closer to my black cousin Nancy than my white cousin Nancy. But in fact, I'm not genetically related to my black Nancy. We share blood, Nancy and I, my white cousin. There you go.
All right, Nancy. That's, this is the stuff that, when we were writing, it's just like, we tried to write life plainly.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much nuance and complexity around American history in American life. And for me, Wink opened up this idea through ancestry of finding out that we really are all like connected in some way, right? And in our book, and I won't give away too much, Wink, but Wink and I, one of our biggest disagreements was could we see each other as old Americans? Could we see each other as old Americans? And see each other, and part of that question came from his quest of finding out who he really was and finding out who I really was. And we're just this cornucopia, if you will, of like different identities. And you're part of that. And it's so fun to like have you on. So what are your thoughts of all, like, we're just kind of this is the first time we've met you, Nancy, and it's in person on a call. And you're probably like, oh my God, these people are crazy. I don't know what's going on right now. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, let me say again, I'm not crying. Allergies are going crazy.
Oh, I hear you.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, that whole thing of like rallying against stereotypes is something that I have really strived to do in my life. And like, I mean, yeah, like my family, I grew up poor. I lived in a homeless shelter for a year when I was 11. Like, my parents have a 5th and a 6th grade education. They dropped out of school to take care of their younger siblings. Like, I could go on and on. My mom was raised in Boston. Like, so, I mean, yeah, I guess we all do sort of, I don't know, maybe believe in stereotypes. Maybe it's the media. I don't know what it is. Yeah. But, you know, I try to live my life not doing that. And also people around me that it's really common to see people, you know, stereotype people, I guess, based on race or whatever. And I'm like, sure. That. Get to know somebody first. You have no idea. And if someone looks like they have it all together and they look very polished, you don't know. And also you could have someone who, I mean, you can always have that person who quit school in 6th grade and they're like a CEO of a major company. Or
now, Nancy,
maybe someone graduated some really prestigious school and then due to whatever, they live on a park bench. So you really have to find out what people are about.
Now, Nancy, I think music is a great way into someone's soul. I think music, at least for me, music is a great way to feel at one with the universe and to relax and to be in peace. So I'm so curious, because you're a native Virginian. I think you were born in the 1970s, right? What are some of your favorite music groups from your young days, from your high school days?
Well, so I'll say this first. I love every type of music except country. Okay. No one hate me. No one hate me.
No! I'm going to hate you.
No one hate me. I know. It's supposed to be the most popular genre in the country. Don't do that to me. Don't give me country music. Unless it's old school, like Johnny Cash, Travis.
Oh, yes.
Old school people. Yeah. I get it. Everything else, I love
Wichita linemen, Galveston. Yeah.
Oh, give me some. I drive my people at work crazy because I play jazz all the time. They hate that.
Do you really?
I love it. But, I turn up louder. I love it. At my wedding, I played big band and singing. Like, I love that stuff. I'm kind of an old soul with music.
Uh-huh.
I really kind of love everything, and I even sort of embrace sometimes some of the newer stuff. I love the beats. Like my son introduced me to like EDM, electronic dance music.
Okay.
And I'm like, oh boy, and he's like, Mom, can you turn the music down? I really love everything except country. But I guess I would say growing up, I was a child of, I know, it's nuts. I'm a child of the late 80s, early 90s. Gosh, it's going to be really embarrassing. Yikes. Oh, I do love some AC/DC.
Oh my gosh, girl. We are, yes.
Yes. And let's see what, I mean, I guess back in the day, like 15-year-old me loved some New Kids on the Block.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, everybody did, you know, you're going along with her. I mean, I don't know, like, probably this Vanilla Ice. With that also, I think, I know, yikes. But like, growing up, you have this like really narrow view of music. You like what you're
right,
and everything. And
right.
The internet days, I didn't have access to, a wide variety of music, and we didn't even have cable in my household, so I didn't have a large database to choose from. But now, like, I'll listen to anything. I'll give anything a chance. And I like, sound like, oh my gosh, I really love jazz. I love big band. I love swing. I love EDM. I love rap and R&B, as long as it's not demeaning to women. And that's where I'll draw the line.
Oh, that's good.
That's where I draw the line. But yeah, I don't know. That's kind of where I am.
That's good. I like that. Now, as Jen knows, my tastes kind of run the gamut. So, for example, I could find myself enjoying love songs by Anita Baker, and I can find myself just grooving to Mandolin Rain by Bruce Hornsby and The Range. The Beatles.
Cool.
He talks about Bruce Hornsby and The Range a lot. Mandolin Rain is his like kind of go-to song. Yeah.
It is.
And it really is, and it's funny. Well, I don't know. Funny's not the right word.
Sure.
Is it for Virginia? I mean, like, I never saw.
Well, yeah, okay. That's right.
I don't love it, but it's nostalgic.
It is nostalgic. Yeah, it certainly is, Nancy. You're right. Well, Bruce grew up in, I think, was it Williamsburg? And his brother went to University of Richmond, and I think Bruce went to UVA. Oh, wait, diverse. Bruce went to University of Richmond. Brother went to UVA. But when I hear it, it just brings me back to the 1970s. That's what it is. It's nostalgia. Yeah. So I have
to tell you, this is funny because Nancy, I'm like you. I never liked country music ever. But there's something now. I don't know if you can have. I don't know if this is like a paradox. If you can have nostalgia for something you didn't have, but country music now to me, like modern country, not like I love Johnny Cash. I love the old country, but modern country music now, it evokes a feeling of a past that I never like. It evokes a feeling for a past that I did have, but I never in that past listened to country music. But there's something about like family and life and like just kind of simplicity that the music that I like that speaks to, that there's a nostalgia there but I never listened to country music. So country is a new genre for me, but I will tell you, Nancy, you and I mean, when AC/DC comes on, I mean, it stops. Life stops and we rock out. I mean, Thunderstruck, end of story. We're rocking out.
You got to listen to some Sinatra too. You got to listen to
Frank. Yes.
All right.
Nancy's so there.
No, he was hooked up with some shady. He was also hooked up with shady people.
There were some shady types. There were some shady types. Okay, what's your favorite Frank Sinatra song, Nancy? Which song or songs do you really love?
I mean, look, this is so played out. I'm almost driving myself crazy with it. I mean, for real. My boys joke, and they're not wrong. When I hear the song, I will play it on repeat like nobody's business. I'll drive everybody insane.
I'm the same way. Yeah.
It's nuts. But probably Fly Me to the Moon.
That's good. That's good.
But I mean, I love it. But my dad bought me. He is like the strangest gift giver, and he no longer can drive or go shopping. He's 85. He lives with me. I'm his caretaker. But like 7 or 8 years ago, his favorite thing to do, go to the thrift store, buy things, read his Christmas gifts.
Right.
You never knew what you're getting. It was pretty entertaining. And usually I would get things like, I don't know, like a stuffed rooster. This is a thing I really got. Just weird stuff. But one year he actually gave me the Frank Sinatra Greatest Hits.
Oh, really?
I'm like, I didn't know really anything about Sinatra. Put it in my car. I was like, dude, great. And my kid at the time was like 5. And he was like, Mommy, I love this is happy music.
Oh,
and
really?
Like,
That's nice. That's nice.
Yeah. So yeah.
In the wee small hours of the morning, I like Moonlight in Vermont. I like, what's the other one? I Did It My Way. I like that one too. Yeah. All good songs.
So Nancy, like, tell us a little bit more about you. I mean, you've told us a little bit. You know, you grew up poor. You even grew up in a foster home, if I heard you correctly, for a while. Like, tell us where you got interested with that, with your life, and then you did the 23andMe, and you said that that was another story for maybe another day. But give us at least a little synopsis. Like, how did you come to be interested in ancestry? Like, give us your background.
Well, so growing up, my mother always would tell the story. I guess I would overhear her talking to friends or something. And then I overheard it, little nosy Nancy heard it, and I would go to her and ask her from like a very young age, 5, 6. And I found that not me, but she's the one that grew up in foster homes, multiple foster homes.
Okay.
Her mother had her at 16. She was an alcoholic. And so she didn't have a great upbringing. A lot of those foster homes were not great. But she I don't want to say let slip, because I'm like her, like there's no secrets. She never had secrets. We're open books. But I found out that I have 3 siblings. She had 3 children that she had to give up for adoption. Because you rewind those times, there's no welfare. And she had no family support. So 3 children given up. So like when 23andMe first came out, you know, I was a very early adopter, and I always wondered about my siblings. I tried to convince my mom when I was like 15 or 16, I finally got the guts to say, Mom, like, can you just find them? Like, don't you want to see? And she was like, I don't want to ruin their life. I don't know if they know they were adopted. So she never would. Well, my mom's been passed away for 20 something years now. She's, you know, been gone. But it always weighed on my heart. I'm a Christian. I pray. I prayed for them. You know, when I pray for them. I don't know them, but I'm just like, hope they had good lives. Like, I had heard my mom's story, and I'm like, God, I hope, like, they didn't have that kind of life. That was kind of my thing about 23andMe. I was like, maybe I'll find them. Like, I just know that they're okay, had a good life. So that's why I joined. And I'll try to keep it brief, which is not something with me.
Go for it.
For real. But interesting enough, I did not find them on 23andMe, but I did, like 10 years ago, I got a letter in the mail. It was from social services. One of my sisters had tried to open the records, but you can't close adoptions. You can't. My mother would have been the only one that could, but she was passed on. And because I was the next of kin, he allowed me to open it. Anyway, long story short, 3 siblings. I know all of them now. I found them. We're in touch. It's fantastic.
Oh, good.
But that's really why. That was my thing about getting on 23andMe. I was like, I need to know that they're okay. Like, they're my blood. Like, I want to know that they're right.
Yeah.
And like, so like, I found them, and not like I don't get on there anymore. But I mean, I would get it again, like every 2 years I get on there, like, are there any other families no one told me about? Like, I got any other, like, siblings out there no one told me about? Or am I kin to some, again, weird serial killer, you know? So that was my journey with 23andMe, you know? So that's kind of my deal.
You know what's funny? It's the same motivation I had, but mine was more on a macro level, whereas Nancy felt that that hunger to know more about her siblings. She knows they're out there, but she wanted to connect to them. I felt the same way about my Twyman roots. I knew that there were distant Twymans out there who were white, and I wanted to reach out to know who they were and how they were doing. And in some way, it felt like it made me feel more complete. I felt more whole in a sense. So that was part of my motivation as well. Yeah, just on a larger scale, Nancy, on a larger scale. So I totally get that.
Wink, let me ask you something, though. This is really interesting because you have that passion. And as we've already mentioned, like to find who we are beyond what we look like.
Right.
Clearly, people who are watching this instead of just listening to it will see that Nancy is a very blonde white woman.
Can't you see the resemblance? Look,
No.
It's like the nose, right? The eyes.
Hey, I'm a dark brunette, but you know.
Okay, all right.
There you go.
You look good as a blonde, Nancy. But Wink, when you shared with your family, your immediate family, this passion of yours, and this, once you found that your history was literally and figuratively so colorful.
Yeah.
What was their response?
Oh, I think they were not enamored. I think they sort of amused me. I think that their sense was someone's not family unless you grew up together, unless you went to the summer home together, unless you went to the barbecue or the picnic together or cut the turkey at Thanksgiving dinner together. So their view of family and their interest is very limited. It's very concrete. So I think they view my more cosmic passion as bemusing or of little note. They don't have the same curiosity, if you will. I mean, I think case in point, I was once having a conversation with my son. I won't mention which son, but we were talking, and I was showing him pictures of Oak Lawn in Albemarle County, Virginia, which was built in 1750. And my son said to me, well, Dad, the only real Twymans are black Twymans. And I just thought that was very funny. I mean, on one level, well, that shows some pride in our family roots dating back to Twyman Road. But on the other hand, in the United States of America, half of the Twymans are black and half are white. What better platform for understanding, right, in terms of creating a greater sense of family? And the first Twyman was an Englishman, an indentured servant teenager from Kent, England. So it's kind of ironic that in the year 2020, my son would say, well, the only real Twymans are black Twymans. Because on the one hand, like I say, it's a reflection of the strong sense of self my parents and grandparents created on Twyman Road, but it also is kind of myopic because there's a larger world of Twymans out there that I readily accept as, like him, part of me, right? Jen, I've always thought it was very strange, and you and I have talked about this. I have family members who are half European in ancestry, 75% European in ancestry, and yet they never acknowledge or think of the white part of their ancestry. It's like it doesn't exist. It's like in a Stalinist regime where you airbrush out opponents of the regime. I mean, I think a lot of Black American families airbrush out those parts of their genetic family, and I think it's to their loss. I think it creates a hole, if you will. It creates a sense that this is what it means to be if you are a Black American, and it can never be more expansive than that. And I just think that is so, I think it's so limiting. I think it's so myopic. I think it is so constraining. I think it denies people the fullness of the universe in terms of your ancestors and where you come from. I mean, Nancy, you may or may not know this, but through 23andMe and Ancestry, I discovered all kinds of blood kin, not just white Twymans, but George Washington, second cousin, 7 times removed. Robert E. Lee, fourth cousin, 4 times removed. What do you make of that? I'm not sure, because I'm still working through the answers with Jen in our book, but I just think that knowledge and understanding makes me a deeper, richer person in my self-conception than if I only think of myself as a descendant of Black slaves and nothing else. I think that's just more of a box, and that the reality is the universe is fuller than that. That's what I think. So I like it jazz, Nancy. I enjoy reaching out and meeting all kinds of folks in the world. That's my MO. Uh, that's my brand, Wink. So I love to do that. I love to do that. But Jen raises a good point. I mean, how do you, if you have two different ways of viewing one's genetic self, how do you bring those two different ways of viewing one's genetic self into a unified whole? I don't really have an answer. I think we're working through that. But I think conversations like this are a great start, right? Because I think if more people see that people with love and joy and laughter and smiles embrace their cousins that may look a little different, they may have different musical taste, who knows? But if you can see people embracing people across the color line, that's all to the good. All to the good. I won't live to see it, but I think in 100 years, these issues won't be a big deal. I think people will advance to the level where they will only embrace all of their past. You know what I mean? That's what I think. So I think that Nancy and I are like, we're the avant-garde. We're the vanguard. We're the Galileos of a better way of being in the world. So that's why this podcast gives me such joy and pleasure. Because I feel like we're speaking not for today. We're speaking to be a better model for our children's children.
Yeah, and Nancy, gosh, it's so fun to be. I feel like I'm an interloper, if you will, in Wink's life. You know, I mean, I've had my own, and we'll have podcasts with my distant cousins too, who are across the color line. But I mean, just to be witness and just to see these conversations that aren't the conversations that are making it into our normal daily life. You know, everything's got to be literally, and again figuratively, black or white. This is this is a new way to be in the world.
I think so.
Don't you think, Wayne?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad you finally checked your 23andMe, Nancy.
Right? I wish when I got that initial message from him, I got messages from so many people on there, and they were usually something like,
right.
Here were my surnames. Are you related to these people? And there were so many, like 50, and it was so much. It was overwhelming. But Winks, yours was definitely the most interesting and gave me more info, but I mean, just my life was so busy. And, I responded back, and I probably intended, like, it was very, very interesting to me, but I think just life got in the way. And
exactly.
So that's kind of what happened. Yeah. But, like, when it comes to race, like, I dealt with this, like, I grew up in, like, the poor white part of town, and, like, I always had to hear, like, some racist comments from people, and it always hurt my soul. My mother, like, a human is a human is a human. No one is lesser than anyone. And it always hurt when I would hear people cut somebody down for, like, their skin color. And even today, like, I don't care, skin color, gender, race, sexual orientation, whatever. A human is a human is a human. Please treat people the way that you want to be treated. Everybody deserves respect and love. And, I remember thinking as, like, maybe 18-year-old me, I remember thinking, like, this world would just be a better place if all the races just mixed and we were just one big soup of everything. I know that's a weird thought, 18-year-old me, but I thought, then maybe everybody can stop hating each other, right?
Yeah.
But now, just thoughts. But I really have an interest in anthropology, and I love learning about cultures. And I love, like, we have a local festival here. Every year it's my favorite. It's local colors. You go, it's all the different cultures, and you learn about, like, performances and the food and everything. And I so love learning about that. And I think that's kind of what's wrong a lot with a lot of the hatred is, like, people are afraid of what they don't understand, so then they express hate toward it, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't like that. So if I do one thing on this planet, I have 2 boys. If I do one thing on this planet, if I, impart to them to not hate on what you don't know. Be open-minded.
Yes.
Be open-minded. Like, if you don't understand it, you've never been around it, don't hate on it. Ask questions about it.
Ask questions.
Yes.
One of my sons, okay, look, I told you I don't know how to keep it short, but I'm going to keep this one short. One of my sons, a 15-year-old hen, brought home this kid. He was in our house for like 2-3 years. Okay. Sweetheart of a boy, had a lot of anxiety, didn't talk a lot. Turns out, I learned like 3 years later, this person was transgender, born a girl.
Oh.
I didn't know. I thought this person was born a boy and was gay. I asked my son, is this person gay? My son was very mad at me for asking that question. I said, I don't care.
That's interesting. Yeah.
This person speaks like a girl. I don't care. I'm just curious. It's no hatred. But anyway, and I'm so glad to have met this person, born a girl, trans to a boy, has trans back to a girl. I don't care. That same son, I love this phrase. He taught me something. And by the way, this is my boy. I think I told you on the email. He has Asperger's. So he has a hard time with like understanding social cues and facial expressions. But this is something this boy taught me. He said, when it comes to people like judging people for like race, skin color, religion,
right? If
you trans, whatever, he goes, you know what, Mom? He goes, what I like to tell people is, show me on the doll where that hurt you. I mean, come on. Like, just because someone's a different race, a different gender, a different whatever.
Sure.
If it's not hurting you, mind your business. And let's just all, I do live by the golden rule. Believe in Jesus.
Yes.
Look, my boy Jesus, he intermingled with the prostitutes and all that, right? We would all do good to do that.
Amen. Amen, Nancy.
Well said, Nancy. Well said. So, Nancy, what's the meaning of this happening today? Like, do you think we will succeed in bringing more love and joy into the world with this conversation?
Well, I think that even if this has meaning for one person, if it changes one heart, maybe that one heart can change 2, and those 2 can change 2, and that can explode because I don't know. That's something my mother again imparted on me. Like, I know it's cliche to say be the change you want to see in this world, but it's true. Like, just like go up to somebody that, I don't know, when you're going through the Hardee's drive-through, Burger King drive-through, you get your food, and those people are overworked and they're, making minimum wage. How about just, like, skip your Starbucks the next morning and give them a $5 bill and be like, I love you and God loves you. That's what I'm to do. That's literally my mother's words. She legit did that, and it embarrassed me so much as a teenager. But I see what she's doing now, and it's so powerful. And I think you can show love to other people. Like, look past what you see here. Look past that. I mean, how many are perfect? How many of us haven't done something shady?
True.
I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed and angered that I have a relative that owns slaves, but like, again, like, and I'm not equating this to that, but like, how many of us haven't done something shady? And so if you remember that yourself, look at this person over here that, looks like they're panhandling, but they're not really a panhandler. Like, how about you just show some love? Because you don't know what people are going through. Everybody's going through something. And again, look,
that's true.
I don't know how to keep it short. But I think I told you. But I think if you really if you can affect one person, I think that matters. And I know in my life, there have been people that did little tiny things that they don't even know how that lifted me up and motivated me to be a better person. So, you know, that's kind of where I'm going with that. I think, you know, again, I don't know how many listeners you have, but if we can reach one person, I think it's valuable.
I think that would be good.
You know what? I'm laughing because I from what I just heard you say, Nancy, I think I would sum it up by saying shady doesn't have a color and love doesn't have a color either.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I will it's been such a pleasure. I'll let us end on that. It's been I hope that we have Nancy, you're awesome. And this has been so much fun. I hope that we get to have this conversation again. And we'll send you the book so that you can like give us your feedback. And maybe after you read a little more, we can like touch base. Because again, you make a debut.
That's right.
Even though you don't